All right, I now call to order the June 1, 2020 Policy Committee meeting of the Belton Independent District Board of Trustees. We are meeting this evening under authority of Texas Government Code Section 551.045 and with the authority of the Governor's Office via video conference to advance the public health goal of limiting face-to-face meetings to slow the spread of coronavirus COVID-19. I'd like to thank our administration and technology staff for making the technology possible for the committee to meet in this manner. This meeting is being live streamed on the board's YouTube channel and recorded. The recording will be made available to the public. Additionally, members of the public who seek to exercise their right under state law to address the committee on an item on the agenda for tonight's meeting have had the ability to do so in the manner listed on the notice of this meeting. As I mentioned a moment ago, to comment on an item on the agenda for today's Policy Committee meeting, members of the public were instructed to submit their comments to be read into the record. Elizabeth, would you please read any comments that were received from members of the public?
No comments were submitted.
Okay, with that said, we are now going to item 3 on the agenda, EIC Local Academic Achievement. Dr. Deanna Lovesmith, are you there?
I am here.
Okay.
I am here.
You take the floor. Take it away.
Well, I'm here tonight to talk about EIC Local, and I am going to share my screen. If the host will make that happen, please, or if you'll share the packet. EIC was in it. Thank you. Getting there. So tonight we're going to talk about EIC with a goal being that it would be submitted to presented at the June board meeting for a first reading and a second reading at the July meeting. And the goal of that is to have this policy solid and in place before we start the upcoming school year. And so as you may recall, this is a policy that we do annually review at this time, only because our policy changes depending on which graduating class you're in. Once we reach the graduating class of 2022 and the policy is designed to be consistent for all classes, it will no longer require an annual review. So with tonight's annual review, I have put in red new language and struck through language that is no longer applicable. So starting with the new language, or starting here in the first paragraph in regard to calculation, we need to add the language dual enrollment on-ramps courses. So coming to the June board meeting will also be a contract for us to partner with on-ramps. It's a standard curriculum that the Texas Education Agency endorses, and it's the equivalent of dual credit. However, it's called dual enrollment. And what that means, we plan to offer the pre-calculus course. It means students pay for the course. It's about $300 for the course, but they can decide at the end of the course whether they turn it into dual credit or not. Now, for a learner, this gives them a lot of flexibility because they can decide, well, I made a C in this course. Well, that's good enough for my high school credit, but maybe I don't want that C to reflect on my college transcript because I was in fact in high school. And so it just kind of allows some flexibility. It's not going to compete with any other dual credit offering that we had. And so it's a real good opportunity for us to offer this course. It's a standard offering at districts our size. So in looking at other policies and ones that we somewhat mirror, the correct placement of this course is at the same place as dual credit. So throughout the policy, I've added that. Then I've struck this language here. It wasn't needed. It should have said AP and dual credit courses. We just didn't need that extra language there. In the weighted graded system, I recommend we remove the language of referencing our course planning guide and actually reference our policy and EIC exhibit. That's just a cleaner place than a course planning guide. And when we finish looking at this policy, we will look at EIC exhibit as well. On level 3, I added, again, the on-ramps. And then this next section, we start to take, subtract language for anything that involves specifically the class of 2020, because that's part of our annual cleanup. So I've added the word graduating class of, and now this section will just reference 2021. I removed in this language anything that talks about beginning with that class, they'll be combined, because now we can just say they're combined. So we don't need to reference in here anything specific to 2020. We can remove the language of those, and it's this, all of this section just follows class of 2021. No content, no structure, no changes. We're done within this section, except for, again, the addition of the on-ramps course, also in this language. And then finally, one more time down here, when we address on page 3, when we address the weighting of the courses, again, I removed all the language that was old, and just now can say, we no longer need to separate Belton High School or New Tech. We can simply say, because we've already established that they're combined, dual credit courses receive 15 additional points. Here, we were able to strike through the beginning 18-19 school year, because now everybody follows this rule and are these places, and we and they're the standard places we've had in place: transferred grades, how we determine our local graduation honors, how we determine our val and sals. None of that has been changed. How we break ties, and our honor graduates, our higher graduates, all the way through the end are early graduation. So there are no additional proposed additions to the policy other than the reference of on-ramps, and then just the removing of some language from the prior class. Now, the last time we spoke of EIC local, it was during our at-home learning process just about a month ago. And at that time, and the last time we met, one of the things that we discussed was adding a section that would specifically deal with times of closure. So I contacted the Texas Association of School Boards, TASB, that's who we use for our policy, spoke with Eric Narcisse, who is our contact for policies, and spoke with him about that. Was he seeing that in any other districts, or could he give some model language? I was a little surprised to learn that he actually does not recommend that practice at all. He said now, and if the board does feel like we want it in there, it is certainly your right as a board to put it in there. This is your governing policies. However, what Mr. Narcisse said is that he recommends that school boards follow the exact process that we followed, even though sometimes challenging, to go through a board adopted resolution at that time. His advice and recommendation is that to write a paragraph that would in any way address all of the nuances that could be affecting us at that time would be very difficult to do, and that he encourages boards to, and administrative teams, because I think we work on that together, to really take a look at the circumstances that your system is feeling at that time, and address those as you feel best aligns with your values and your practices and your specific needs, and not to try to put it in this policy. And so that is, so I have not included it based on that guidance. I can move to EIC local, or EIC exhibit. I will just tell you, spoiler alert, I'm only adding the word on-ramps there. So rather than maybe moving to that, I do want to show it to you before, of course, in this discussion, but I think this would be a good place for us to discuss now what I've presented, and what questions you have, concerns you have, and what else you might like us to do with this policy.
Deanna, would you, this may sound silly, but I don't know much about the on-ramps. Would you discuss that a little bit more?
Yes, so it is new for us to use as well. Other districts our size are using it. It's been out for a while. It's a program that allows a student to take a course. So we're going to offer pre-calculus. Right now, we only offer pre-calculus, I think it's pre-AP. I have to go back and look. We'll offer it as a dual credit. It's called dual enrollment option. And so a student, just similar to a dual credit course, pays to take the course. The course is offered through our teacher, but we receive the curriculum for it and the year at a glance and all those pieces. And then the student has the option upon completing the course whether or not that course will be on their transcript, and if they want to pursue the college credit piece for it. So you don't have to, you don't automatically receive it. It's like dual credit. But with dual credit, you make the decision the day you sign up for the class that it will go on your transcript. So if I apply for Texas A&M, and I took U.S. history through Temple College while I was at Belton High School, then that transcript is going to go to my college, Texas A&M. Whereas with on-ramps, it does not have to. So if it leaves a little bit of the safety net for a student that's wanting to try the rigor of a dual credit, but may not want to commit to that being on their transcript.
So there's two things that happen with this on-ramp. One, they have a transcript option, and number two, they have a dual credit option.
That's correct, and it's offered through the University of Texas, Austin. So, and it's standard curriculum so that's another piece about it. So, other large districts that we look at and what they are offering provide the same opportunity, but it's the same for everybody. So we're all working with our teachers to use the on-ramps curriculum provided by UT of Austin, where with maybe our dual credit, for instance, we contract with Temple College to offer dual credit English. Well, we may have a different dual credit English teacher for each section. They may do things differently. Our dual credit with Temple College for English is not the same as a dual credit that another school district uses, because they contract with their own entity. And with on-ramps, we're all contracting with the same entity, which is the University of Texas.
So if a student chooses not to have exercise the dual credit option and chooses not to put it on the transcript, do they still get credit for the course?
They do, and the reason that they do is because they took the course. They took the course, which was at the rigor of the dual credit. So it's the same with advanced placement. I take the advanced placement course. I choose whether or not I'm going to take the AP exam, but that AP exam doesn't determine whether I do or don't get the weighted points, because I sat in that rigorous course. And so I feel like they're parallel in that aspect. And I've studied what other districts that we've kind of modeled our point system off of, and to make sure that on-ramps is that's put in that right spot.
Rosie, you and Chris have any questions about that?
I do. So are we testing pre-calculus and then possibly looking at other courses as we move forward?
I believe we will. We'll have to look carefully at our contracts with our local entities like Temple College. We never have wanted to compete, so we only want to offer one option. But there have been areas where our providers, I know Temple College in specific, they're a main one where we, and University of Mary Hardin Baylor, but there have been times where they've struggled to identify enough professors maybe for our course load, or we've had challenges with the number of classes making, a class making to offer that. And we don't know what that will look like as we continue to grow and what the demand will be. But for right now, this is a good way for us. We believe it's a good way for us to start with the pre-calculus. And for a lot of kids, quite honestly, pre-calculus might be all the math that they need for their college degree, and they might be able to fulfill a 3-hour course credit through us. Just depends on what your course plan is in the university you're planning to attend.
All right, we get a couple questions. Sorry, I'm sure you weren't prepared to come in and talk about on-ramp. In so much detail.
I try to be prepared to talk about any and everything that might be.
Yeah. I mean, so our teachers teach it, right? So it's the shared curriculum, but our teachers teach it.
Our teachers teach it when
that's great. Okay.
Yes.
And so just from a cost perspective, looking at accessibility of the option, right? How does that compare, like the $300 for on-ramp, how does that compare to the dual enrollment cost or the dual credit cost?
I believe that on-ramps is $300. It's equivalent. It's $300,
Okay.
and I think that's about what you end up spending for dual credit. But
Yeah, I thought it was about the same. I'm just trying to figure out, like, okay, great. I want to make sure that it sounds like a great option, right? I want to make sure that it's accessible to everybody, right? Just from a cost perspective. Okay. And so if I go look at page 4, like I think this is one of the first changes. Let's see. The graduating class of 2021, beginning with the graduating class of 2021, the graduating class of Belton High School shall include Belton High School students and Belton New Tech High School at Wascow students, right? So that's basically saying, hey, look, we're combining them into one graduating class.
Correct.
But we're still keeping the separate valedictorian, salutatorian across those.
So that's what was decided last year when we wrote this policy. I'd have to go back and look at my notes to see if it was last year or 2 years ago. I believe it was last year. That was the recommendation that came out at the time. That came from the fact that both campuses still have their own graduating class. That was a recommendation made from the student committee. So I met with at the time top graduating students from both campuses. They really wanted that because that is an honor for a ceremony. Mm-hmm. That being said, it's important to note that there is a highest ranking graduate,
right? And
that is not the that will not be necessarily the valedictorian. We also talked at the time about being very transparent that, remember, they're a combined class. So it is possible that the valedictorian for either one of the schools might technically be the 4th or 5th person in the entire combined rank.
Right.
But would be recognized as the top graduate from that program, whether it was Belton High, Belton. That's a local decision, and those are local honors. So
right.
So yes.
Okay.
And we did not
any further right now. Yeah.
So at the time, we did not put anything in policy to specifically name Lake Belton High School. Right. If you think that would be clearer, then I could add, like right here where, I don't know if you're seeing my arrow move around circle. Mm-hmm. Okay, so where we have Belton High School and Belton New Tech, we could create another section that would say Lake Belton High School, and then just put the highest ranking student will be named will have their own valedictorian and salutatorian.
Well, I think actually we covered that on page 6 under valedictorian and salutatorian. Like Lake Belton High School is actually mentioned there.
Okay.
Yeah. So the second,
right.
Like,
okay. I didn't remember it.
sorry, it's page 6 in the packet that I'm looking at.
I'm like, okay, I don't have the page 6.
Okay, it looks like it's page 4 of 5 of the policy.
Page 6 of the packet.
There we go. Okay, so it's like the second paragraph.
Here it is right here. A validation, right here we go. Good.
Yeah.
I'm just making, I thank you. I apologize for not remembering that.
No, that's okay.
But yes, that is important to be in there, that we do specifically name who those people that will have one at each of those 3, even though Belton High School is combined.
Yeah. So when I read through this, I think that was the only place I caught a reference to Lake Belton High School.
Okay. Yes. And I'll tell you what, at the bottom of it where we have, I remember now, I'm sorry. This specific on page 5, this section specifically talks about the highest ranking graduate. And because we had the 2 at each of those campuses, when we worked with Eric Narcisse, this has been 2 years ago, we wanted to ensure that we really clearly spelled out, only one of you would be the highest.
Right. Okay. And I think we're going to have to revisit this again at least one more time next year, I think, right? Yeah.
Yes. Well, one more, and then by the time we're into the preparing for the class of 2022, we will have one policy that addresses everybody and won't be, this policy is difficult right now. It's a little, I don't want to say choppy, but we're still in a transition of how we're calculating the policy from, we just added points to implementing truly the 7.0 system.
Right.
Course levels.
Okay. And I guess the only other comment I have is I'm still kind of torn up on I don't want to call it the pandemic policy, but the out of school, unplanned school closure, right? Because I certainly understand, like, how do you write a paragraph that captures everything? You probably can't, right? I get that. I have had at least one conversation with somebody that was pretty broken up about how we handled it. And I think after the fact, they went back and sort of did the calculation of the GPAs both ways. And they're like, oh yeah, it didn't change. So I don't know how true that is, right? And how many examples there are. I mean, I'm certainly okay to sit on it as it is at the moment. I don't have a better suggestion. I mean, certainly we could revisit this, again, but we would want to, I guess any changes we make to it, we would want to make sure we do it before a school year, right? So
I think that's a good thing to bring up, Chris. I think in this one, and I think Deanna did exactly, what our district would do in doing due diligence on this and calling TASB. And I understand TASB's recommendation on it. I will say, though, that local policy is up to the purview of our board. And if our board feels like we do need something in there, we definitely have the authority and the ability to put something in there that will at least maybe help avoid situations like we experienced earlier this spring. And so I, like I said, guidance is guidance from, different legal services and stuff. And there are other things that we can explore as well if this committee would like us to explore that.
Yeah. I mean, I know there were several of us who kind of at the time said, hey, look, we could always add something. And actually maybe three of us on here, it might've been all 3 of us that said that. Like Rosie, I'm pretty sure you were there too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I just don't have a better suggestion right now.
Well, my concern would be that we are about to enter a school year where we have 1/3 of our parents, if you're just looking at global statistics, we have 1/3 of our parents saying that they're not going to send their child back. So you've got that distance learning and you've got the possibility of another closure, and we don't have anything in our policy that addresses how that's going to affect the students. And so I do respect TASB, and I do understand that we cannot predict every disaster, but I do think that we can put a policy in place that would hit most disasters. I mean, the question becomes, and maybe I'm just being too concrete, but to me, the question becomes, you know, do you just end it at the last grading period that you had, and students know that ahead of time, similar to what we discussed? I'm not saying that should be the answer, but it does seem to me that there's an answer that's out there, and if we were to be in the same situation next year, we would be okay for our seniors, but we would have the same classes and you know, now even another policy in with the on-ramp, or another opportunity in with the on-ramp, and you would have students in the same predicament, whether it affected them negatively or positively. We go back to the exact same discussion that we had to have just a few months ago. So I'm a bit uncomfortable not putting a policy in.
Deanna, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the issue that we had when we discussed this policy before, when we were trying to make a decision about pass fail, when do we calculate GPAs and whatnot, that the issue was providing parents and students with notice as to what was going to take place, in that if we made a certain change, we were not going to be able to give them notice because they had a certain expectation. And when you have an unforeseen situation occur as it has occurred this year, then first of all, we have the authority because we exercise that authority to make that decision. But secondly, could we draft something in our policy and make some sort of addition? I know you can't cover every potential contingency, but if that were the case, then you know, I don't think lawyers would draft contracts, because obviously you can't cover every potential contingency, but you can certainly cover an unforeseen. You can use the word unforeseen, which is what happened to us this last time. You can cover natural disasters to give people at least some kind of idea of what would take place with their class ranking or their GPA in the event of another unforeseen circumstance. Do you have any thoughts about that? Because I know you were really concerned about that with the students and parents, because they had certain expectations.
So I talked to Eric about that. I said, when I talked with him, I said, I really feel like we're going to want something in there. And he continued, you know, he continued to say, again, he just you know, their stance is use the resolution practice. His fear is that we would put anything we put in there could tie our hands to making a different decision than what we might want to make, given all the variables at that time. That just continued to be the concern. My thoughts were, because I felt like we all, and I'll include myself, had suggested let's put something in there that was before I talked with him. We certainly could add a section that says, you know, school closures due to emergency situations, and we can work on and then put in a paragraph that says that due to an unforeseen or unplanned disruption in the school schedule, we will revise our calculation of class rank to include the nearest ending of a 6 weeks, that if that's what you want in there, possible. I mean, we could do that. The challenge will be that we were kind of lucky on our plan this time, if we'd wanted to go that path, because we happened to close school closure immediately after we had completed a third 9 weeks. What happens if we're in the 8th week? We only had 1 week left. We hadn't finalized those grades. Would we finalize those grades? Would we not finalize those grades? What if it was the 7th week of the 9 weeks?
What if it was September?
What if it was September? So that's why, I mean, I hear, because I've wrestled with this. I knew this ahead of time before coming today that, oh, I'm going to have to kind of retract some thinking there. And what am I going to do with that? And I see the point, and yet it's painful because, and it is like Matt said, you know, this is our local, this is our decision. This is your decision board. If you want it in there, if I can receive some direction on what you're looking for, then my next step will be to write something and to send it to Eric and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. What does this language look like? And happy to do that. But as I've been processing it, I do see the many unknown variables that we could have. Some people that will elect to stay home, some that won't.
Well, will we be at a different point this go around? And you know, there was a lot of kudos and with all the work that our teachers and administration did. So, I mean, are we at a point to have a grading system for a natural disaster that we put some sort of policy in there that reflects that, you know, we've learned from this and that we're ready? I don't, you know, I mean, that's just another angle to think about it. And I'm not saying that's what we should put in. I'm just saying that, my gosh, you guys worked so hard to take care of our families. It's not like we didn't do anything.
No, it's not. We learned a lot. I mean, anytime you do anything for the first time, you learn from it, and you have an opportunity, should it ever occur again, to be different. Never in my career have I ever had a plan for a school closure that would last more than about a week. That was never in our concept of thinking. It is now. And we're working towards that. And I definitely feel like we will do some things differently at the elementary level, and we'll have some different resources and some different training we're providing to teachers for what that will look like. When I reflect on the secondary level, we took grades. We did turn it into a pass-fail. For some students that worked, and from other students that was a struggle. But when we talk about meeting the needs of every student, when you move like we did to at-home learning, even though we will continue to increase teacher capacity and support for how you deliver online instruction, we continue to improve on accessibility by providing devices and providing resources. At the end of the day, there is personal trauma that happens in a home that can change a home's dynamics on a dime. And we have to be prepared to support that as well. And I think that becomes the challenge in writing a policy or writing something ahead of time.
Deanna, if I understand correctly what TASB is recommending, basically they're saying do it by resolution on an ad hoc basis, basically. Just a case-by-case basis.
Correct.
You know, where you are at that time, then you make that decision. But to take it, and maybe we can do it that way, but going back to what I understood your concern was initially, was that the students and parents of this district need to know that may happen. And that it may not, you may end up on the wrong side of the fence when that calculation is done, and there's nothing that we can do, because we can't accommodate everyone. So we have to do what's best for the district at that particular time. But at least if we had something in our policies that let parents and students know that could happen, then I think it wouldn't that alleviate your concern or address your concern about notice?
So it would, and I will tell you, I asked Eric some very similar framed question of, well, what if we put in just a simple statement that says school closures, and then we just put a statement that says, in the event of an extended school closure, the board will, this policy will be reviewed by the board in a resolution presented to with potential impact in a change in how grades are calculated.
Right.
Now I've told you. That's
right.
all. I've checked the box. And the response I received back was, well, you can do that, but it's not necessary because the board already has that authority, given their authority to provide a resolution during that time. That being said, I hear you, and I could easily write that right pretty much in front of you. I could put that in that says, well, we know we recognize you have that authority. You all know you have that authority, but let's just make sure in this case, the public truly understands you do have that authority and you will execute it given that time.
Right. That way we're taking into consideration what TASB is recommending, plus we're addressing the concern that we all voiced whenever we had this discussion in the board meeting and in our policy meeting at the time when this issue arose, right?
Absolutely.
Now, we're actually talking about two things here. We're talking about that provision, but we're also talking about, which is separate and distinct, when the school year starts, is what Rosie's talking about, is how are we going to, if we have a third of the student body out for whatever reason, you know, the parents decide, well, we're not going to send the kids to school because of COVID-19 exposure, those kinds of things and those risks. That's a whole separate issue that we're not necessarily discussing today, right?
Right.
But
Yeah,
it's something that may come up later.
And I think to your point, to all of your points, I think, yes, I mean, obviously we reacted this spring because we had to react, but we have an opportunity this summer to become a little more proactive in all of this topic and in our practices regarding student learning. The learning that we saw this spring was outstanding. We're very thankful for our central office leaders and our principals and our teachers that got this up and going. But I do think it's going to evolve for the fall based on exactly what Rosie said earlier. Like, there's a good chance that we may have a significant portion of our population who may not want to be sending their child to school. Early indications that we've gotten from TEA is that we have to, as a school district, figure out how to still educate those students. And that will mean having to take grades and figure out how grades are involved in all of this policy and stuff. So I think your points are very well taken. I think you all are being very nice, and I'll be very blunt on this. I think you're being nice. I don't quite understand TASB's guidance on this. To me, there could be a portion that we could put in this policy that could say, in the event of a long-term school closure, here's how we will calculate GPA and class rank. But we can also do exactly what we did this last year, and that is, if something significant changed that was unforeseen, y'all could use a resolution again to amend that policy. So I hear TASB's concern on it, but I do feel, going back to your point, Manuel, we were all concerned, and Deanna said it well in the last meeting. We were all concerned because we had not notified our parents and our students appropriately what we would do with a long-term school closure. We have an opportunity this summer to actually do that through this policy. And so I am a little surprised at TASB's guidance on it. I get it, but I do believe that if that is something the board wants us to address, and policy is where you all live, right? If that is something that the board and this policy committee wants us to address, we have the opportunity to do that. And I think that might provide the stability that we were looking for.
I don't think we should necessarily nail ourselves down and say, well, if something happens in September, this is how we're going to calculate things. I don't think we do that, but I think I would feel comfortable if we put some sort of policy in place that is more of a notice provision to parents and students, that in the event of an unforeseen extended closure, that we're going to have to make some sort of resolution at that time that's going to be discretionary with the Board of Trustees, because a decision has to be made at that time. So I think if we have a policy in place that lets folks know that, then to me, I think that's sufficient. To say nothing about it, even though we have authority. I mean, it's always easy to say, well, we have the authority to do that. Well, we want folks to know that we have the authority to do that, and we're going to have to exercise it in the event something like this does happen again. Deanna, any more thoughts on that? I mean, do you feel?
Oh yes. So over to this. So I could include, I don't know if you want me to go ahead and include that potential language for us to discuss. But I worked on, so what we could do is if the district experiences an extended school closure, the Board of Trustees will review the impact on instructional learning and may pass a board resolution modifying calculation of class rank and grade point average. When making the decision, the board will include the following: number of days of school closure, so that would be the total days of school closure, number of days within a grading period, ability to include a portion or all of a grading period. And then I can put anything else, or but when I think about what we struggled with, and it was failure to notify, well, here's notification. And then what to potentially include. Well, if we had this measure in, we could have said, well, hey, we can include the entire third 9 week. We told you we were going to look at this. Here it is. And so we could certainly do that if that would, and anything else that you would like.
You know, that last part where it says when making this decision, I would feel more comfortable. We said when making this decision, the board will consider the following. Well, consider the following, but not necessarily limited to that. There may be other factors that we're going to consider in making that decision. Right. Because those 3 bullet points is exactly what we were struggling with when we made the resolution before, right?
And I think this this language. So then if we are closed at the 7th week of the 9 week period, let's just say, then you can decide, well, was that enough to go ahead and close out the grade? Is it not? I mean, it allows us to just kind of take into account any scenarios that might be before you. Just for clarity's sake, I will add this as read since this would be new.
And of course, this may change. You know, we do our first reading, and then by the time we get to the second reading, we may add or subtract some language. Rosie, you and Chris have any thoughts about this language here? And actually, do we do this, or do we go with TASB's recommendation and just leave it alone and address it on an ad hoc basis in the future?
You're muted.
Oh, I'm comfortable with the change. I vote to put in the change.
Yeah, I'm good with the change. Let me ask a question about it though. Does this change in any way cut the legs out from underneath anybody, right? So, you know, Matt and team, right? I mean, do you feel supported, right, with this change? Do you feel adequately supported with the change, Dr. Love-Smith? Do you feel adequately supported, right? You know,
Well,
I don't want to do anything that cuts your legs out from under you if we don't have to.
I know. So here's the
Yeah.
thing. Either way, we're going to end up in a board resolution.
Right.
Because if there's extenuating circumstances. What this just does is this tells everybody clearly ahead of time.
Yeah.
If something changes, we may change, and we will make, this doesn't tell us how we'll make the decision.
Right.
At
Right.
all. This just tells us this is what we will use. This, to me, this only says, heads up, there could be a change.
Right.
And that was the one thing that we did not have this time around, is we didn't have a clearly communicated, we could be needing to change this. And so I think what we need to send the message to, and we can get our teachers to make sure they send a message to, is every day matters.
Right. Yeah.
Every day.
Exactly. That's exactly what's going through my head. Yeah.
Every time you do anything, it's going to matter in terms of this. And these stakes are high.
Who defines extended
I'm good.
school closure?
So Matt, I started speaking before you started. Do you see any concern?
Yeah, so I do. Manuel just asked a question, and I think we need to address that one, and then I'll come back to mine. Manuel, you just said, who defines a significant school closure?
Yeah, who defines extended school closure? I mean, do we need to define that, or do we just leave it? Is that 2 weeks? Is that a month?
I wish you hadn't gone there because I've got all kinds of questions on that.
Or just school closure?
So in my mind, actually what we had wasn't really a school closure, right? We continued educating. That's not a closure, right? So I wish you hadn't opened that can.
I will share my concern because I think it aligns with this a little bit. I don't have concern with what is written. I will be really blunt in this conversation. I have concern about the position that this puts the board in, because as Deanna said, no matter what, you have a resolution that you're going to have to do. This does not clarify what direction the board and the administration will take in the event of a long-term closure moving forward. What this does is just give our public notice, but it doesn't take any kind of a burden off of you or administrators to have a solution for that long-term closure. And the reason I say it like that is, so then in this case, you will at a board meeting be having a resolution, and you will consider these things and still have to make a decision of when the right time is to calculate GPA and class rank. And so my only concern in this is the position, not necessarily that it puts the administration in, because this policy is really from you all as a board, but it's the position that it puts the board in, because it doesn't give us a clear path moving forward in the event of that school closure.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, I mean, the good news is, if there is good news, is we do actually have some structural things in the policy that could be exercised exactly as they are. And we did fall back on that this last time, right? So we could say, hey, look, we're going to go with what's in there, right? But I think it does address that we don't know what we all know, and something way worse or way different could happen. And okay, great. If that happens, then we're going to roll with it. So, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't
I appreciate that. I mean, I was sitting here thinking, well, geez, like that just puts the eyeball back on us, but the eyeball's already on us. So I don't know that it's any worse than it would have been before. Yeah.
It's more of a school.
Deanna, are you hesitant to put in different scenarios of when we would cut off grades, speaking to Matt's point? Does that put you guys in a, I know I understand that Matt is talking about the position that the board is going to be in. But if we were to put cutoffs in the scenario of a significant closing, does that put you, the administrators, in a difficult position?
From my perspective, I don't think so. And here's why. We already have done that for the seniors in the current policy as it stands. It says it right in there that seniors, your GPA and class rank will be calculated at X time, right? And we went through that. We talked about that. Now, could we have a scenario for everything? No, but to Chris's question earlier about, and Manuel's question about what constitute a significant school closure, if we put something in there that says if classes are closed for more than 3 weeks or whatever it might be, we will refer back to the previous semester class rank and GPA calculation, whatever it might say. I don't think that hurts us a whole lot. And the reason I say that is it already exists in there for seniors. We've already spelled it out for seniors and other students. I think the only thing we haven't spelled it out is what happens if the length of time is pretty significant and we're not in a normal semester. And then I think in that case, that's where we need the guidance from my perspective. But I don't see a burden on the administration. I think in any case on this, if we had to come to you with a resolution, we would propose to you what we believe, just like we did the last time, the best resolution for you to consider, have you all consider it as a board, and have you adopt appropriately. I think that's fine. It's the same with this policy. We would, if you would like us to include a scenario for extended school closure and define it more clearly and provide how we would approach it. We can provide that for you all, but again, it's your decision whether or not you adopt that and how you want to proceed for the future. And Deanna, feel free to weigh in on that too.
So we're bringing both questions back. So Manuel had separated them earlier. He had separated the whole issue of the grading from the issue of we didn't notify the parents, but it seems like we're coming back and we're putting those both together again, which I'm fine with, but I want to be cautious because I think I feel pretty strongly in one way, and I want to make sure that I'm being fair as a member. You know, I saw pretty clearly that we could do the same thing for every other class that we did for the seniors last time. And I fully respect that that wasn't the best decision that needed to be made at the time, but it seems like we're bringing those two issues back together rather than separating them. So I just want to clarify that.
So I need to ask more on that one, because the determination of our grading practices and whether or not we go to a pass fail grade, et cetera, is a totally separate policy that's under the superintendent's purview.
Right.
So I don't see that. I maybe what you're referring to is the school closure piece. When we say we're bringing that topic up, is that what you're referring to, is we're bringing both issues back?
Well, school closures and so it sounds like earlier in the meeting we were separating school closures and what do you do in the event of a school closure. And now it seems like we're talking about school closures and we are going to put some specific information in for what we would do in the event of a school closure. Am I missing something?
I think from my perspective, we have to provide grades for the upcoming school year, even if school ends up being closed for physical attendance. So we're going to have to figure out a way for us to move beyond the pass-fail system and provide learning experiences for kids that will get grades. But I think maybe I just understood this. Maybe it's more about the policy stating if there's a significant interruption to the district's ability to collect grades for students due to a pandemic or a natural disaster or whatever it might be, then here's what we might refer back to on for our policy. I think maybe I'm getting that now. Maybe that's the crux of it, because it's not about whether or not we collect grades. We're anticipating collecting grades moving forward, but where we would enact this policy is if we could collect those grades. Okay.
You know, I want to make sure that we don't handcuff ourselves to being too specific when we draft something. And Matt, I think you pretty much summed up my thinking, was that what I was talking about and adding to this policy was just simply providing notice to the students and parents that in the event of an unforeseen situation, that the board is going to exercise its authority to make a decision, and not necessarily say, well, we're going to consider this, and this, but just we're going to exercise the authority to make the decision, which may change the way things are currently written. I mean, that's I think if you limit it to that, it makes it simple. We're just saying that we're going to exercise our discretion in the event that it's necessary, because you can't possibly address everyone's needs. It's impossible. And you're still going to have to collect grades. You're still going to have to determine class rank. You're still going to have to pick whoever the top graduate is. But just like Deanna was talking about, if it happened in September, oh my gosh, what would we have done then in making a decision? So people just need to know that in the event something like this does happen, if there's some sort of disruption in normal activity, not necessarily call it an extended school closure, but there's some sort of disruption in activity, then we're going to have to exercise our authority, and calculating class rank is not going to be how it's written above. It's going to be different, and it may not suit everyone. I would be more comfortable with that as opposed to being very specific.
Thank you all for that clarification, helping me work through it. I was trying to figure that one out. I appreciate that.
Yeah. because I think the community expectation is, hey, look, we're going to do this better, and we're going to deliver the education that we would be delivering if we were in a classroom, right? I mean, that's the community expectation, right? So, and so that's where I get a little twisted over the extended school closure, because in that case, I think we're delivering school. It just happens to be in a different location, right? And so maybe it really is about the inability to collect grades. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, just to revoice that, right? I mean, I think, like you said, a community expectation is that we find a way in the fall, if there's a closure, to deliver differently. Yeah, and count those grades, and yeah.
So is it better to say a disruption of normal school operations? So how we're normally operating as a school has been disrupted in some way, shape, or form?
I think we might have to put our
Better.
administrative minds together,
Okay.
Deanna.
Yeah.
Because I think we might have to wordsmith some things, and since we're both have Smith in our names, maybe we're the right people to do it.
So we can work on that, but we've got the gist of what you all were looking for, and then he and I'll get together and okay.
Yeah.
Anything else in this policy that you want to have added or discussed before it goes to first reading? Then I would like to just share with you quickly.
And I think Rosie was going to say something. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I'm going to go back to the other thing, and maybe I'm just being slow. I want to go back to New Tech and to the high school and to Lake Belton. And I get that Lake Belton is going to be a separate high school, okay? And it's separate all the way across the board, right?
That is correct.
I have respect for why we need to have New Tech in order for UIL purposes and extracurricular events. I understand that they've been under the high school, okay? I understand you made a decision to combine grades. I think I struggle a little bit at this point, though, with why they should get their own valedictorian and salutatorian, and we're keeping Lake Belton clear and free of mixing up the schools. So just explain it to me one more time in the policy. I think I'm missing something.
No, it's unique to our system, and this was one that this is a unique situation in that Belton High School and Belton New Tech High School at Wasco each have their own graduation ceremonies. So we start there. That was and that could always change. That could be a new a change moving forward. They have had their own, and the intent was for them to continue to have their own. Because they have their own, the intent then was to recognize a valedictorian and a salutatorian at each of those ceremonies. And that was an honor just associated with, honestly, those ceremonies. If we had one valedictorian and one salutatorian for the combined of the two, you could run into scenarios where one of the ceremonies doesn't have a valedictorian, or one does not have a salutatorian, or one does not have either. That one of the two only has both, and the other has neither. And so when this policy was presented, again, I believe it was 2 years ago, that was proposed, or it may have just been last year. I would have to go back, but it was proposed that that's how those two campuses would be addressed, that we wanted them to have their own ceremonies and to each have those honors at those recognitions. And so the policy was written to honor that just thought. We could certainly change it.
I don't know that I'm asking you to change it. I think I struggle with, you've got let's just say that we have our kids attending Belton High School, and they are attending that high school because they're zoned to that high school, right?
Correct.
And we're keeping Lake Belton High School clear and free of any muck related to UIL. I understand that.
Mhm.
But New Tech gets to come in and have the advantage of having more numbers, which was one of the concerns about their class rank. So they get to come in and they get to have the advantage of having more students. They can be, potentially, they have a greater chance of being in the top 10%, which was one of the concerns that they raised at one point, okay? But now let's say that the majority of our kids are coming from the zoning of Lake Belton High School. Why should then the student that has to go to Belton High School that would be valedictorian, if those students at New Tech weren't being counted in to their grade point average, why is it that we are not taking into account that it seems like we're giving New Tech a lot of perks. I don't know how to state it in a more polite way. And we're not giving that same advantage to the students that are zoned to Belton High School. I think I just don't understand that. If we're combining them, why do we continue to give all these separate services to New Tech? And
So within the policy at this point, that I believe that would be the only separate recognition within this policy. Everything else has been written so that they're combined. So they're now treated equally. At one point in time, dual credit was calculated differently at Belton New Tech than it was at Belton High School. And so we've kind of fixed all that. So all high schools are calculated the same. This solely is a representation of within a group of students at the best way I can think of it to say, and this is the board policy, so I'm open to whatever I don't want to come across, any other way to say that within a graduation ceremony, we are recognizing at every one of our ceremonies that the top ranking student in that group of individuals will be recognized as a valedictorian or a salutatorian for within that group. But when it comes to the highest ranking graduate, then we will say that is truly the highest ranking for the combined class. And that's by law. I mean, that's what the state says. You can only name one person per school. You have to think about all the scenarios. And so when we talked about this, there are all kinds of things that could happen if we do not do this. So let's just say we say no. You Belton High School, New Tech, you may have your own graduation ceremonies, but there will only be one Val and one Sal. Those positions could both be at Belton High, so New Tech has neither of those honors. Those positions could both be at New Tech, and Belton High School has neither of those honors. I mean, I think that was the part of that concern, is that you would have that when I will tell you this one, when it was discussed with the board at the time, there were varying opinions on it as to whether it should or should not occur. And all I can say is, in talking with the students, they were very clear in wanting this. Now, they did say that they would like for the real Val to be known as the first statement to be made that would say you're the valedictorian of Belton High School and the highest ranking student of the entire class, or something but they still wanted both of those honors. If that's not something we want to continue, then we certainly need to note that here in the policy.
I don't know that I'm asking for anything to change today. I just think that it just feels incredibly messy to me. But I don't know that I have a solution or change. I think I just needed you to clarify it a little bit more.
May I ask a quick clarifying question to Chris? Is that what you were alluding to a little bit earlier as well? Some of these same.
Yes. I think this is really messy. And I would love to have further conversations on this. I'm not suggesting that I'm on one side of the fence or the other, because I think there's probably some opinions that I haven't heard yet, right, on either side. But it feels wonky to me. And so I would like to revisit this, not impacting this school year, right? But I would like to revisit this and really understand, as we figure out, the direction that we're going, what do we do with this, right? To make the best decision, right? I mean, I'm thinking of the term, maybe it's a top graduate, right? If you're not the valedictorian, you're the top graduate at that campus. I don't know, right? There may be lots of ways to do it, but it feels wonky to me. So, yeah. And I don't know, I can't remember who I said this to before or not, but there's some interesting community feelings about New Tech versus Belton High School. And I think some of them are based in truth, and I think some of them are just rumor, but I would love for us to sit down and figure out what it is that we're doing at New Tech High School that really works, right? And really would benefit all of our students or more of our students, and get that implemented in Belton High School and in Lake Belton High School, and figure out, of those things that Belton High School is doing that maybe benefits the students better than something that's specifically happening at New Tech. Like, take that and roll that into New Tech, right? Like, I don't want to hide any goodness anywhere, right? Like, I want to spread that goodness for all of the students to have an opportunity to benefit from, no matter what campus they go to, right? And so that's kind of where I'm coming from when wanting to look at this again.
One thing I would just suggest in looking at that is that one of the things we typically do with this policy is we do not like to interject any change of magnitude midstream while kids are already in the flow, right? So kids are in the system. So right now, even though they knew they were going to be combined, there are kids that are vying for, but they believe there'll be two. So if we were to change that, we would certainly want to think about the timing for when that would go into effect. So would it go into effect with 2 years from now, 3 years from now, or 4? We want to just keep that in mind. That is one that involves, my recommendation would be some just timeliness in terms of telling students. And then certainly we could talk about, the New Tech and why it'd probably a good time to revisit why it was established. And it's, fundamentally set up different from our large comprehensive high schools.
Deanna, do you think the timing would be maybe next spring?
Well,
since we're going to be in our new, I have the new high school already up and running, and then we're going to have to change it because then at some point we're going to have a graduating class from Lake Belton. So, are we talking about having 3 distinct schools? Is that what we're talking about? No?
Right now, we are entering for next school year. We have officially 2 high schools.
Right.
New Tech is considered a part of Belton High School, but in terms of single number, in terms of UIL, they will be recognized officially on everything as Belton High School. And New Tech will be like an instructional program as part of that campus, but it's on a separate facility. It's a unique scenario to our system. And in terms of your question of when to implement, whether it's next spring, well, if you waited until next spring, that would be a different class to impact. I would feel comfortable with a change in that starting for next school year. It's just as long as the kids entering into that system for competition do know, in fact, that change has happened. You could not input it. And this is why with this policies, we've moved to language that says beginning with the graduating class of. So we would need to decide what graduating class would we separate this. It would not be fair to change that to the graduating class of, to include the graduating class of 2021. I would not recommend that. They're over 3/4 of their way through. They have one that, that's a significant change. With the current freshmen right now, which is the graduating class of, 23? They've technically had one grading point to contribute to their GPA because we didn't put anything in for the spring semester. So we could discuss, well, is it timely enough to notify them? So we might say beginning with the graduating class of 2023 or 2024. We would just need, so whenever we want to have that discussion and include that change in, I want you to be, to know that we would definitely recommend it coming ahead of time for a group, ahead of us, any kind of calculation.
I'll throw one thing in real quick too on this, and I think Chris alluded to this a little bit earlier, and that's, how we plan for the future and the direction that we want to go for the future in Belton ISD, I think is important for us to discuss. And I think as we get into things like strategic planning, and I'll give you an example. We may want to see more schools of choice and options in Belton ISD in the future. I don't know, because we haven't engaged in that discussion as a community and with the board of trustees and with me as a superintendent. But that may affect the way we talk about how we do GPA, valedictorian, salutatorian, class rank, and things like that for others. And I think we have to spend some time studying as a community and as a team of 8 where we want to go for the future, and that might also impact some of these policies and decisions along the way. So I appreciate you all. I didn't realize, and I appreciate Rosie, you speaking your truth and bringing it up, because I didn't realize some of the concerns that were laden in this policy with that to their full extent. And so I appreciate you engaging in this conversation now. That gives us some food for thought as we timeliness, and we bring some things back to you to keep thinking through as a policy committee moving forward.
Absolutely. Is there anything else in this policy that we want to discuss, or this is great conversation.
I think just one video disclaimer for anybody who's watching this back or potentially watching live. Right. I don't think we're in any hurry to make changes. Right. And so please don't take that away from this conversation. I think we really do need to have the bigger conversation about, what does the community want? Like Matt was saying, right? Like, what do we want? What's the portrait? What's the path of a graduate? What do we value? Like, I think it's all wrapped up. And so we didn't throw anything on the fire tonight. So
we were trying to not build the fire tonight. I appreciate
right, exactly. Yeah, like please, we did not
much.
do that. Like, I think there's a lot of good conversation to be had. So,
I want to say real quickly too, I applaud you all as a policy committee, but I really applaud Deanna and her leadership through this discussion on EIC local over the last 2 months. I'm very thankful for her leadership in the way that this has happened throughout our system, because I think this is an example, and I've said this and I'll keep saying it, this is an example of the administration and the board working together to try and do what's best for kids. And I appreciate that, the leadership of you all, and Deanna in getting this done.
Deanna, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you. I do have one more piece to show you with EIC, and this is the EIC exhibits. So within the policy and all the changes we have, this is what we're getting to right here. And at the class of 2022, we will have all classes operating under this system. And this is, instead of doing an added points, this is where we've leveled our courses to skills-based courses, regular courses. Level 3 are pre-advanced, so pre-AP, dual credit, and on-ramps. I've added that, you can see, and then level 4 or our AP. And so the only revision to this is, like I said, the addition of the word on-ramps. However, this is something that I do feel like as we continue to work and you all work as a team to look at our goals and our goals as a graduate and what we want to offer our kids, I do feel like we need to look carefully at this and make sure that where we place courses aligns with how we want to provide opportunities for kids and recognize those. Specifically, you know, this went through a committee again 2 years ago to prepare for the policy with where we would place our dual credit versus our AP, and then and our on-ramps right now does belong with dual credit. But so I would just, this also is something that we may want to revisit exactly what falls in those areas. Any questions or comments about this? Yes.
Okay, I've got to be the guy always, right? So help remind me why AP is where it is in relation to dual credit, right? And so part of what I'm thinking and asking that question is there's maybe no bigger measure of like how well that credit's going to serve you than actually having the credit, right? And so like I could rationalize in my head like dual credit and on-ramp flip-flopping. Again, I'm not suggesting that we do that right now, right? But help me understand like why AP is level 4 and dual credit is level 3, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And so that is a local decision. And I want to start there. When we studied districts and where they place things, you'll see everything. You'll see where they're the same. You will see where are on the same level. You'll see where they're on different levels. One important thing to be aware of is that AP courses are of no cost to students, and dual credit courses are. So one thing when we talked in the community, I wouldn't recommend ever having a higher weighted course that cost money if there wasn't a free comparative option. So
completely
right
agree.
Now,
yeah.
Right now there would be. So I can tell you, it was a local decision. I can tell you some impacts that happened from it. Right now, let's take English 3. That's a great course to use because we have an English 3 dual credit option. We have an English 3 AP option. When we have students that compete for class rank, many will automatically choose the AP because of the higher weight. So there can be a limit to what a student will choose or a value placed on what they'll choose based on the class rank we give it. There's been AP is a national curriculum. So now they are recognizing like a year, we're following a year at a glance, we're following framework through the College Board. So AP courses are more aligned consistently across school districts. If you're using that college curriculum, then dual credit would be. But now in terms of what a college does with these courses depends specifically on the college you're going to. For dual credit, as long as you go in the state of Texas to a state school, they will honor the dual credit courses that we offer because we offer state approved courses. We have that base, it's like a basic 20 or something like that. In terms of AP, it depends on if you take the exam or not. We do not tie points to that exam, and it depends on the course and the program. And so I think for us, and that's why I brought it up in this conversation, is that as a board, as you start to think about and we start to all work together to develop a graduation profile and to think about what we want the journey of our students to look like and what we want them to have for their future, then we certainly need to think about the message we're sending in our ranking and make sure it's aligned with what we believe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the way it's written here makes a lot of sense based on how we currently do things. And I wouldn't want to make any changes, right, from my standpoint until we get through those other activities and really decide, with, you know, from a community standpoint, where do we want to go? What do we want out of the schools? Like, I wouldn't want to make any changes till we get that. So, yeah.
Right.
So
I see all different kinds. I've seen everything. When we've studied policies, I've seen districts where, so another difference, AP courses, there are teachers. There are students. Dual credit is grading outside of our system. So it's not always done or aligned with maybe what our philosophies are or what we practice. I've also seen districts that don't include dual credit at all in the class rank. They just say that. So I mean, this could go so many different ways. When we got to this point, we studied. I pulled policies across the state that varied, so we could show the different examples, and we had a number of parents and some students and our teachers who weighed in to get us here.
I'll just jump in real quick, and I won't get on a soapbox for long on this one, I promise. I do appreciate you bringing this up, Chris, and asking the questions on this, and I don't think now is the right time to dive into all of this long term. I do worry often that we as adults have created systems of ranking and sorting kids that have impacted their freedom to learn and their ability to learn. And what I mean by that is I am concerned about the mental health of all of our students in Belton ISD and in districts around the state and around the nation that are chasing GPAs and GPA games because that's the system that we have set up for them. When I use that phrase, freedom to learn, I really do wonder if we didn't assign GPA and grades, would students still take the same courses, or would they take courses that were more aligned with their passions and their future career interests and maybe their hands-on type experiences and things like that? I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that we do anything. This is my disclaimer now to this policy at this point. But I appreciate you bringing it up because I do feel strongly that we as a administrative team and as the board have to think through, do our policies and what we have set up really positively impact students and their freedom to learn in our system? And if not, then I think we have to take a hard look at our policies. And I think this is GPA and rank is one of those really tricky ones. So I appreciate you saying that.
Any other comments or current concerns or questions regarding this? Okay.
Thank you, Deanna. You did a fine job.
Thank you. I appreciate you all. This is a tough one. And I think we continue to work together on it. I can't agree more with Matt to just really think about what we want for kids and what we want for their futures and how do we support their choices in that. And so happy to discuss again.
All right. And I guess our game plan before we move on, Deanna, to Coach Skidmore is our plan for you to bring us something at the next meeting, you know, some sort of notice provision that we're going to add for our first reading. Is that our plan?
So I will. My plan would be to submit for the June board meeting a first reading with all of the revisions and noted in red that you've seen tonight, and included in that would be a paragraph regarding a change in disruption of school learning or whatever, however we work to word that will specifically address that.
Okay. And one thing, Deanna, I think for when we review these policies, if and Matt, you can chime in on this also. Would you guys let us know kind of what you're focused on? Because I know we talked about a lot of different things tonight dealing with this one policy. And I understood more so that you wanted us to discuss more about what we had discussed before in giving parents and students notice in the event of some sort of unforeseen circumstance that occurs in a district where we disrupt normal operations. Because I want you to be able to address all the issues as best you can. So when we do discuss other policies in the future, if you can tell us exactly what you want us to focus on, then we will do that in all fairness to you.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Manuel. I appreciate that. And yes, we'll work on that. I think this was such an interesting and intricate policy that we can go a lot of different ways. And I appreciate the dialogue, but yeah, we can always at the beginning say, here are the portions of the policy that we are really asking for feedback on at this point, or that we're really looking at. And then we also might be able to say, as Board of Trustees, are there other policies that you would like to address, or other parts of this policy that you would like to address in the future? And I can be more clear about that. I appreciate it.
Because when I read this, I mean, obviously there's a lot of other things that we could start talking about tonight. I mean, we can just start dissecting this thing and just have dialogue. But for purposes of what you guys want and what you want to be prepared for, if you'll let us know what you want us to focus on, then then that's fair to you guys. But obviously Deanna's been at it so long that she can address just about anything in here that we ask her about. But in all fairness to her, whoever's presenting at that time, if you'll just let us know what to focus on, because I want to focus on whatever you guys are focused on at that time. And we can always, if we have something we need to bring up, I mean, it's always on our agenda. If you've got an issue that needs to be addressed later, then we should bring it up at the end of the meeting today. Okay, so that was just food for thought.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so Dan, anything else?
Well, I kind of along that line, and maybe Matt, I don't know if I need clarification or if we'll talk after this, but for the board meeting, I'm going to highlight the changes proposed in red and the normal, the disruption component. In terms of our discussions around the Val and Sal at both Belton UTEC and Belton High School, in terms of how we put courses in levels on EIC exhibit, is that, would you like us to address those in June, or is that something that we're going to reference was discussed in this committee, but that we will, as we work through other work, visioning, the profile, graduate profile, we will bring those back up. It would help me to know that clarifying point.
In my view, and I've told this to Matt before, that I mean the graduate profile, I mean that's where things start, and then we move backwards and try to determine how we reach that goal of creating our graduate profile, reaching our objectives for a graduate profile. So I think we can table those issues that you just brought up to those discussions as opposed to in our next meeting. I
agree.
Yeah.
I think, Deanna, those are longer term discussions that we would need to have at another time.
I agree, but since they came up, I just want to make sure I know what I'm
totally get it.
Talking about on Monday. Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you all.
Chris, Rosie, you agree with that? Okay, all right. All right. Thank you, Deanna. Great job. All right. We're going to move on now to Coach Skidmore. We're going to discuss FFAA local wellness and health services physical examinations. Coach Skidmore, you with us?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir. You got the floor. Take it away.
Good evening. We're asking the policy committee to look at FFA local policy. Sorry, my screen switched over. In regards to the UIL Medical Advisory Committee recommendation to adjust requirements relating to physical examinations for the 2020-2021 school year. Currently, the UIL requires a pre-participation physical examination upon entering the first and third year of high school and upon entering the first year in junior high athletics. Belton ISD requires a pre-participation physical examination annually with our FFAA local policy. The UIL Medical Advisory Committee adjusted the UIL policy for the 2020-2021 school year in regards to the PPEs For this school year only, any participant in athletics or marching band in any grade level who has not previously completed a PPE and been cleared for participation would be required to complete the medical history form as noted below, as well as a PPE prior to participation in UIL practices, games, performances, or marches. The UIL made these adjustments to support social distancing and assist with the workload of medical professionals on the front lines of COVID-19 pandemic. A medical history form would still be required this next year, as it is every year, signed by the parents and turned in. According to the UIL's Medical Advisory Committee basic explanation, if a student has had a physical before and has been cleared, they would only have to turn in a medical history form to be eligible for the 2020-21 school year. Our FFA local policy requires, prior to participating in a designated UIL activity program or other district extracurricular program identified by the superintendent, she'll undergo a physical examination annually and she'll submit a statement from an authorized healthcare provider indicating that the student has been examined and medically cleared to participate in that program. Under normal circumstances, we offer free physicals in the spring. So some things to consider when you're thinking about this. Under normal circumstances, we offer free physicals every spring with the help of Scott and White. We weren't able to do that this year. We are concerned with the ability, especially without offering free physicals, of all of our kids to be able to get physicals. Some of our kids are only able to get annual physicals due to us offering those free physicals. I also believe most clinics are limiting the amount of appointments available each day. So that was another major concern we had, as well as requiring our students to go to clinics to get these physicals. Since we are currently require annual physicals, if we went to the UIL Medical Advisory Committee recommendation, most of our students would have a physical on file that wasn't more than a year old, which is what the UIL standard is normally. We're asking for a resolution to be considered in regards to FFAA local policy for the 2020-2021 school year only, that we follow the UIL Medical Advisory Board's recommendation in regards to PPEs.
So basically, Coach, I guess what you're asking us to do is essentially just eliminate the requirement for this particular year because of what happened, because you normally have it in the spring.
Yes, sir. We usually do free physicals for every student in Belton ISD.
Okay. Now, a student still has to turn in some sort of medical history, right?
Every year they have to turn in medical history, and they still have to turn in this year. And in that medical history form, or if their previous physical had any precursors of things that we need to take a look at, we would require them to have another physical annually.
And that document is signed by both the student and the parent.
Yes, sir. It's part of their paperwork that they have to have in to compete at all in UIL marching or in athletics.
All right. So that requirement's not going to go away.
No, sir.
Okay. So when a kid comes in, if a kid had a previous history, or if something wasn't disclosed before because it wasn't occurring at the time, but now has occurred, and they turn that form in, if they have, for example, hypertension, the kid's going to play football, didn't have it last time, but it's on the form this time. What happens with that kid?
They would have to go get a physical and get cleared for this year by a medical professional. More than likely on that physical, the physician, if they have hypertension, would state need to be cleared by a specialist, and then we would require them to bring a note from a specialist saying they were cleared to participate.
Okay. So any kid with any underlying condition is going to have to go through the process anyway.
Unless their medical history form is cleared. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have. Chris, Rosie?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I'll ask my lawyer colleague, does this hurt us in any way from a legal exposure standpoint? I mean, I don't think so, right? I mean, parent and child signs off, we've got, this is the UIL recommendation. I mean, it seems to make sense to me, but is there any additional exposure?
That makes sense. And of course, Coach, I guess we go beyond what UIL requires anyway.
Yes,
right?
sir. So even if we implemented this policy, most of our kids, because we've required one annually, would fall into line with normal UIL protocols that only requires one every other year.
Okay. I think this makes sense.
Makes sense to me too. Rosie?
I'm fine with it. It makes sense.
Matt, you have any comments about that?
No, I think I appreciate y'all weighing in. I think it would be a resolution similar to the resolutions that you passed already, temporarily adjusting your current local policy for 1 year based on these recommendations here. And if you're all okay with it, we will bring that to the June board meeting coming up and have y'all consider that.
Sounds good. Coach, anything else?
No, sir. I appreciate y'all's time very much.
All right, thank you, Coach. Sorry we took so long before, and I know you were waiting to come in and present this to us.
I like hearing what's going on. It's good for me to know things.
You got to get better on drawing the short straw to go first. I mean,
Deanne Love Smith trumps me every time.
If I could give Coach Skidmore a shout out too, though, I mean, through all of this and the pandemic stuff, his leadership has been truly evident, I think, in our community and providing opportunities for kids and being flexible and doing what I think is right by kids. And so, Sam, I think great job tonight, first of all, Sam, but thank you just publicly for what you've been doing.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Coach, thank you very much. I guess we'll move on. Item number 4, any issues considered future agenda or administrative reports from anybody?
I think we covered several. We'll leave it there.
Okay. All right, folks, I guess we stand adjourned, and I'll see you guys at our next meeting.